Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I'm doing a series of video presentations, just beginning with the textbook for our AWD1111 Node.js class for the fall 2020 semester at Rankin Technical College. The book is Get Programming with Node.js by Jonathan Wexler. I've gone through literally just the intro so far. So now we're going to jump into Unit 0. And Unit 0 consists of Lesson 0, Lesson 1, and Lesson 2. About, and I guess it is, the first 30 pages of the book. Okay? So, the author says here, in this unit, you'll install all the tools you need to get started with Node.js. These tools, as mentioned here, are what what they'll help you write code to get your applications working and running on the internet. So basically, it's going to, again, 3 lessons. Lesson 0, as it says, discusses what you're going to learn in this book and why it's important. Lesson 1 walks us through the installation process for each of the tools that we're going to need. And Lesson 2 introduces us to our first Node.js application. Alright, so let's jump in, and we're in Lesson 0, setting up Node.js and the JavaScript engine, which starts on page 3. Now, I don't normally do this, but just because I want to make sure we're all pretty much on the same plane, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run in. I've already downloaded Node.js, but I'm going to come in here to Control Panel and I'm going to get rid of it. So Control Panel, there it is. The process of setting this up is relatively simple, but anyway. So let's see. M's. And there's Node.js. As you can see, 58 meg, not humongous by any means. I'm going to uninstall it. It's going to go through the process. This will take maybe 30 seconds or so, I would think. And I'm going to come in here because it was running some stuff in here and remove all that stuff. Well, I didn't think it was going to take this long, but it's still not a problem. Tell you what, I'll come back to that. I'll show that I can do things hopefully asynchronously. And let's run in and get back into here. So, in this lesson, you get an overview of what you're learning in the book and why it's important. This lesson acts as a starting guide. So what are we covering in here? Reviewing what we're going to learn, understanding Node.js, which really is something the entire book is about, learning why we develop in Node.js, and preparing ourselves to be able to use this book. The author already mentioned this, but we're going to say it again. The goal of this book is to teach you how to build web applications using Node.js. And Node.js uses the JavaScript programming language. Notice, starting with this lesson, each unit builds upon the one previous to it. Alright? So, I don't think we need to do this. Here are the 8 units that are in the book. Let's just leave them up there for a minute. So again, give us the background knowledge, basic web development concepts, Express, connecting to a database, data modeling for CRUD applications, and we all know that CRUD is create, read, update, and delete. Securing data, authentication, etc. Building an API or application program interface, add a live chat system to the application, and finally deploy this out on the internet so that everybody can take a look at it. So that's a start. All right. Now, it's funny because, understanding Node.js, this is chapter 0, all right, or lesson 0 in a book that's got 37 or 38 lessons in it. So this will be perpetual. In other words, we're starting to learn and understand Node.js. It's a platform, as it says, for interpreting JavaScript code and running applications. All right. Although JavaScript is around 20 or so years old, Node.js, to my knowledge, is about 6 years old. All right, we already heard this. Node.js is built with Google Chrome's JavaScript engine called V8. Here's the key thing. JavaScript can be used to both assist in web page or client-side interaction and the associated server side. All right. Things like handling incoming data, communicating with a database, etc., which again in the past have always been done by other languages. So developers can now commit to mastering JavaScript and use it to build a complete application. That's the key thing. Now, the author goes in here and distinguishes between client-side versus server-side, all right, and says we can break these down into two categories. What we did in the first semester here, AWD1111, in our Web Technologies class, was virtually 100% client-side or front-end. We learned HTML, we learned CSS, we learned Bootstrap, and we learned JavaScript. But the JavaScript that we wrote was totally on the client side. We wrote JavaScript to allow us to have interactivity on our web page. We weren't at all concerned with the server side. That's what this class is about. So where client side is the front end, server side is the back end. And if you've ever heard the term full stack web developer, a full stack web developer is one that can both write code for the client side and the server side. So with the server side, as it says, it's the code used for application logic. Things like authenticating users, connecting to a database, etc. And I think they have a picture of this here on page 6. So this is the client-server interaction. Now, most of the time this stuff is done with HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or secure HTTP, which is HTTPS. But it can also be FTP, which is File Transfer Protocol, but we're not, and others, but we're not going to worry about that. We're worrying right here about the client-server interaction. And as it says here, the client represents the browser. Okay? The client makes a request to the server, not always, but typically one of two ways. Either she or he enters up into their address bar up in here, they enter some kind of a URL, or they click on a hyperlink. All right? Either way, typically what it does is it makes a request to the corresponding server. All right? That's when the server comes in, and as it says, the application runs and handles the data submitted by the user and then responds by returning or loading a page or sending back data or doing both. All right. As it says, because we can now use JavaScript for both client-side and server-side, the line separating the two is disappearing. Again, a full-stack developer is one that can write JavaScript that is used both on the client and on the server. All right. Node.js, as is mentioned in here, operates on what's called an event loop using a single thread. Why is that important? Well, notice that a thread is a bundle of computing power and resources. The bottom line is a thread is what you typically use to get work done. Now, many programming languages are multi-threaded, meaning that each time you want to have some specific thing done in your program, the program sprouts or creates, whatever you want to say, a new thread to do it. All right? As it says, generally a thread is responsible for starting and completing a task. And with many languages, the more tasks you need to run, at the same time, the more threads you need. All right? Now, as it says there, Node.js handles only one task at a time and uses more threads only when it has to. But it's, in an ideal world, is more of a single-threaded language. That's important, but what's also important is the fact, again, and we talked about this before, that it's asynchronous. But we're going to get into that as we go through the book here. Okay. As it says, in most applications that don't require tasks that really use a lot of CPU or processing power, having a single-threaded language like Node.js means that you can quickly go through tasks. All right, as it says, as tasks are prepared to run, they enter a queue to be processed by specific phases of what's referred to as the event loop. All right, and this isn't the kind of thing you have to memorize. Wouldn't make any sense. But notice what we have in here. We've got timers, we've got polling, we've got callbacks, and we've got check. Well, as it says in step 1 here, the Node application prepares the context of the app and the configuration. In step 2, as these tasks build up, they are put in what's called a queue, and they enter the poll phase. So the system tries to run them, for lack of better words, in a single thread as quickly as possible. Now, typically those tasks will have a callback associated with them. So it says callbacks from the queue will run during the callback stage. And if you say, I don't know what those are, you're going to start seeing them very soon. Additional callbacks created here go back into the task queue. Step 4, near the end of the loop, operations specified to run immediately now run. Step 5, tasks set in a timed interval or timeout get evaluated here. Some of this stuff you've already seen when we've run JavaScript on the client side. As it says, as its name here implies, the Node.js event loop cycles forever. So for lack of better words, it's basically caught in an endless loop. It sits and listens for JavaScript events that are triggered by the server. As mentioned there, as the number of tasks increases, again, they're queued up. Says you don't code this with a fact in mind. All right, it's just something that's provided for you by Node.js. And since it's basically provided and scheduled and handled for you behind the scenes by Node.js, as it says, it's become popular for creating real-time applications that persistently listen for data being sent back and forth. That's what we're going to be going through in here. Now, I don't know if this is a good analogy or not a good analogy, but the author likens here an event loop to an office manager, where she or he is able to do multiple things at one time. In a similar way, as the author says here, it says similarly, the event loop handles a series of tasks, always working on one at a time, and uses the computer's CPU or processing power to offload larger tasks, while the event loop shortens the list of tasks. Now, an important distinction is made here on page 8 in the text, and that is the author talks about it here, the difference between a process and a thread. And It makes sense when you read this. That said, it also is a little bit confusing. All right? So the author says here, it's important to note that the Node.js event loop relies on a single thread. In fact, Node.js is designed to pass larger tasks onto the host computer, where it may create new threads for things that are more CPU intensive. So, a thread is defined here on page 8 as a bundle of computer resources used to run a series of instructions, whereas a process is also a bundle, but it's a bundle of computing power and resources used for a task's execution. So notice this is used to run a task. All right? This is used to go through the task execution. It says usually for longer tasks than those handled by threads. Okay. So usually, as it says, the tasks handled by threads are simple and fast. That's why Node.js needs only one thread to act as a task manager. All right? The ones that take longer become a process, and they typically have to exist in their own thread. So, as mentioned here, even though Node.js may be single-threaded, you can have multiple things running in parallel. All right? And they go through some of the reasons that this is why Node.js is good. It's quick. All right? It does a lot of things for you internally. All right? And there's other reasons as well. The author says you may hear the terms thread and process used in conjunction. For this book, you only need to know that Node.js depends on a single task handler. So it's single-threaded, for lack of better words, unless it needs more threads. It says for more information, and I have not looked at this article. I don't know if we can right mouse click on it, open it in a new link. No, it even says page not found, so that's fine. I'll see if I can find that article. So, in this book, the author says, I further explore some Node.js strengths in building web applications. Okay. So, throughout this book, you'll see things like this where they've got a quick check. All right, and I guess I should come down here so you can't see the answer, but it says true or false. The Node.js loop runs each task to completion before handling the next task. You should know already that that's false from what we've talked about. As it says, it removes tasks from a queue sequentially, but it may offload the task to be handled by the machine. All right. So in other words, it allows you to do things asynchronously or to multitask. All right, page 9, 0.3. Why learn to develop in Node.js? Some of the stuff in here we've already talked about. First, you can focus on JavaScript as your core language. You can use it both on the front end and on the back end. And again, remember, as far as that goes, front end is what the user sees. Back end is what happens behind the scenes, for lack of better words. Second, if you want data to stream data consistently, Node.js is good for that. We've already heard it's backed by Google's V8 JavaScript engine, meaning it's widely supported, it's fast, it's constantly getting updated and upgraded, it's not going to go away soon, etc. Next, it's gained a lot of popularity. What we'll look at soon enough is NPM, the Node Package Manager, which literally has almost an unlimited supply of what are called modules, which are code snippets that you can use and plug into a program on an as-needed basis. Plus, you're making yourself better for the job market, all right, because you'll be able to do things on the front end and on the back end. All right. Okay. Preparing yourself for this book. As it says here, From the first unit, you're introduced to web development through a process of building a basic web server in Node.js. We'll add code to it throughout the book. Now, the author recommends this. I'm going to, as much as I can, I can't sit there and watch you, nor would I want to do that. But at the same time, as the author says here, you'll get so much more out of each lesson if you read it and write the code examples yourself. And I'm going to expect that's what you're going to do. At the end of each lesson, starting with lesson 3, there'll be a try this, where you can practice some of the coding concepts presented earlier in this lesson. And we'll, either together or separately, we will be going through those. Now, you've heard this before, but we'll say it again anyway. The goal of this book is to make you comfortable building a web app. Alright? We're going to be building something for a fictional company called Confetti Cuisine, which, as it says, offers cooking classes and allows users to sign up, connect, and chat with one another about recipes. Okay? Now, I like this. I read through this. I like what the author says here. The problem is, let's face it, we all only have a certain amount of time. But the author says, consider working through your exercises in the book 3 times. The first time, literally, I would actually recommend reading it first, and then, as it says, follow the guide. Second, try to do as much as you can, but use the book when you have to. And the third time, see if you can do it all on your own. And that will really solidify your understanding of whatever it is you're going over. Most of the exercises in the book will ask you to use the computer's terminal or command line. Alright, we've already got Git Bash, so if you want to be able to follow along with what they've done, you know, all we'll have to do is, notice if you right mouse click, not there, if I bring up, I think if I do this, let's see, well, you've seen this before, alright, where we come in and basically we right mouse click and it says Git Bash here, and it brings up a command line. I don't know if I can do that from that. It still hasn't removed all of Node.js. So if I right mouse click, Git Bash here. You've seen this before. We've worked with this before. You can make this bigger, etc. All right. Just about finished with this Unit 0. As it says, after completing each unit, all right, by the end of Unit 7, we'll have built a complete web application using Node.js, and we'll attempt to deploy that then in Unit 8. Now, these are things you should already know here, but let's just quick look at this bulletized list. Source files are written in JavaScript and have a .js extension. Okay. Next, the main application file in every example in this book is called main.js unless they specify otherwise. Sometimes they'll be called app.js in other books or other things you'll see online, or index.js. All right. The author recommends that you use Chrome. I always recommend that as well. And finally, let's just quickly go over the summary here. In this lesson, the objective was to teach you about the structure of the book, also to introduce you to Node.js, tell you what it is and why it's important. All right. As the author says, if you treat this book as a course with subtopics and lectures, you'll build your knowledge incrementally. So in the next lesson, which we'll start going through in just a minute, we're going to install the tools that we need. So I'll be back with that in just a couple minutes.